May the words of my mouth and meditations of my heart be acceptable unto you, my Lord, my rock, and my redeemer. What is worship? How does it become a part of our life? And why is it so important? Worship is defined as a feeling or expression to show reverence and adoration, as all the acts or rites that make up a formal expression of reverence, and as honor with religious ceremony or ceremonies. So that's the dictionary version of what worship is. And it's a good place to start. But reading through it, I really kind of hone in on one word: honor. Honor God. Glorify God. In my mind, the best way to glorify God, to honor God, is to live God's way. To live the way that He gave us in the Bible. It's not an easy path. It's not a simple thing to do. But that's how we honor Him. That's how we glorify Him. That's how we edify Him. In our first passage, we see Abram being directed by God to pick up and go, to leave where he's at. He's already done that once. He left Ur with his father-in-law and moved to Haran. But there's a couple key things here. Number one, Abram's 75 years old. How many of us at 75 want to pick up and move to an unknown place, an unknown land, unknown people, and you don't even have a map to get there? God's just going to say, hey, go until I tell you stop. It's pretty daunting. But we know that God gave Abram certain promises. He basically told Abram, if you follow how I direct you, I will make you the patriarch of the peoples of the world. Not your little clan, not your little 4 or 5 kids. Patriarch of the peoples of the world. I think that might be a little bit of incentive. I think I would probably follow that with that kind of incentive. But Abram didn't follow that because of that incentive. He followed that because he loved his God. He followed that because he was righteous, even though it doesn't tell us in these particular passages that he was. That's the only way that God would talk to him, is if he was righteous. Verse 7, the Lord appeared to Abram and said, to your offspring I will give this land. So he built an altar there to the Lord who had appeared to him. So again, we see Abram honoring God. He builds an altar to him. He's a worshiper. That's what we're talking about today. You know, John Wesley, our founder, which, by the way, speaking of John Wesley, one of the things that I received after my ordination was my direct lineage from John Wesley. And I'm the 12th generation pastor that's been ordained underneath of John Wesley. And it's over in the fellowship hall. It's a really amazing piece of paper to see. But John Wesley often emphasized biblical call to worship. And he quoted John 4:23 and 24. Yet a time is coming and has now come when the true worshipers will worship the Father in the Spirit and in truth. For they are the kind of worshipers the Father seeks. God is Spirit, and His worshipers must worship in the Spirit and in truth. For John Wesley, worshiping was done with the whole person, heart, mind, soul, and strength. He didn't half measure it. He didn't give, I'll give all my strength today, and tomorrow I'll think about giving my mind. No, he required that those who taught worship every day with their whole being. He was a very, I don't know quite what the word is, very strict on himself, very disciplined. He got up every day at 4 or 5 in the morning. He spent 2 hours every morning in the Word. He went to church service at 6 a.m. He did church again in the evening. He prayed multiple times a day. He wrote for many hours during his day. And that's on top of, they figure in his lifetime, he traveled about 180,000 miles preaching and teaching the Word around England, all the way to America. So his ideas of how to worship impacted every Methodist ever up to that point. He required purification of self, to match God's holiness and obedience in thought, word, and deed. He was quoted in one of his many sermons, "True worship is knowing and loving God, so that one sinneth not as long as this love abides." It's pretty profound. He also did other things, like in the front of your hymnal, you'll find a list of rules for singing. Some of them are completely understandable. Some of them I totally get. But the one that really stands out says, "Sing lustily and with a good courage. Beware of singing as if you were half dead or half asleep." How appropriate. You know, in my lifetime, I've found that when I allow the Spirit to reside in me, to guide me, to strengthen me, I can't sing halfway. Can't sing half asleep. The joy comes in. And even though some of the words I may not know, or some of the tunes I may not know, I'm going to give it my best college-level educated attempt. That's what it's all about. But that's what worship is all about. Worship is not coming in on Sunday morning for a 1-hour service and maybe going to a Bible study through the week once. Worship is living that joy for our God. Living in that grace that He's given to us. That's worship. And there are some people, Pentecost, they dance and they wave their hands. Sometimes they speak in tongues. Baptists, they're a little more reserved, I believe, than that, although they have their moments. But I truly think that sometimes we're worshiping wrong. There's a thing that I read. It talks about mega churches. The mega churches have 15, 20, 30,000 people. And yet the number of overall Christians in the United States, percentage-wise, hasn't increased. They're not doing worship right because they're not taking it out of that way. Marianne said it perfectly. It's not what we do in here, it's what we do when we walk out of here. God has given us so much grace, so many blessings, poured out so many mercies on us, and what do? And I'm guilty of this. I am absolutely guilty. Walk out of here, God, that was done. When's football start? Who's racing today? Where are we going for dinner on Tuesday night? Not walking out the back door and seeing those little birds sitting up in their nest getting ready to fly. You realize they're a gift from God. A blessing that I got to see them. How many times do we take for granted the things that we have in our life? Sight, sound, smell, taste. The people that exist in our life, the people that affect our life, the circles. How many of those things do we take for granted? The last 3 days, even though there was some business accomplished, even though there were some funny jokes made, both up in the pulpit and out in the crowd, it was an expectation of being worship-filled time. It was an expectation that you would walk around the corner and you would meet somebody eye to eye, instead of just continuing on like we do in our normal everyday life. They would greet you. They would ask after you, how's your day going? Did you go and see this? Can you believe over in the gym they had this lady up there talking? It was all worship. Because they were excited to be in the Lord and amongst those who are following the Lord. That is what worship is. You know, there's one gentleman that went up and received his elder. And his name is Artie. And I've known Artie for a couple of years now. He's been in a couple of my classes. I've had cause to interact with him. Sometimes the most humble, loving person on the planet, you don't realize the impact they have. When he walked up there, kneel down on that kneeler, there had to be 25 people, elders, deacons, regular people, that came up to lay hands on him while he was ordained elder. The entire board of ministry went up and laid hands on him. That's a man that's impact. But you talk to him, you would never know it. You would just think how loving and caring he is. And so far as I've seen, I don't think he's ever forgotten a name in his life. So when he saw me, he was like, hey, Jen, how you doing? Hey, John. Somebody walking by that I've never seen in my life, and like, hey, Beth, how are you? Where did that come from? I know she's from northern Arkansas because I talked to her husband. That's the kind of person he was. Filled with God's love, filled with God's light. So when we worship, when we sing praises to God, all of those are important. But what we walk away with is more important. How we live our life is more important. In verse 19 and 20 in the Romans reading, it said, without weakening in his faith, he faced the fact that his body was as good as dead since he was about 100 years old, and that Sarah's womb was also dead, yet he did not waver through unbelief regarding the promise of God, but was strengthened in his faith. Here's the key part, and gave glory to God. Worshipped God. I'm of the belief that if a 100-year-old man can hold all of that kind of faith, all of that kind of worship in his life for God, then I should not quibble about doing as well. I should not falter. I should not be hesitant about worshiping God to that degree. And then the other thing that really stands out to me, this man restarted his life at 75. Built an altar to God, praised him, continued in his faith at 100 years old. How many new beginnings does God have for each of you? How many new beginnings does God have for me? But just like Mary Ann said, if we don't reach for them, we will never realize them.